So let me kind of briefly give an introduction to myself. My name is Keshani Ranasinghe, and I work as a HR consultant, and I am also a lawyer. And I do a lot of work in supporting startups in Sri Lanka to understand what are the basic legal knowledge that they need to have when starting up a business, and also along the journey as well. So let me kind of tell you what we are going to do. So we have 3 sessions, 3 weeks. We'll be talking a little bit about the necessary legal aspects for entrepreneurs. And in this, hold on, my slide deck got stuck. Right. So I like to start off always with this quote. And this is a quote given by Kevin Plank, who is the CEO of Under Armour. And Under Armour, as you may already know, is like a giant clothing manufacturer or a brand when it comes to sports goods. And they are like a direct competitor for Nike. So they almost produce the same kind of concepts that Nike produces, but at a much lower price point. And it's what Kevin Plank always spoke about was like it starts with not having a hangover with the way things used to be. Because if you take the sporting industry in US and the clothing market, sports clothes were always extremely very expensive. And whilst majority of that profit will be taken by the company themselves or the brand, and how very little of that was actually shared down the supply chain. So Under Armour were actually kind of pioneers in kind of bringing down the price point, so giving a better, attracting better customers, but at the same time, they were more conscious of the supply chain and ensuring that they used more ethical standards, and also ensuring that people got a fair wage for the work that they did. So this is like a very interesting quote when it comes to businesses, because you all know that currently, if we take a business, and if you're really hoping to grow your business, it's just not enough just understanding the law and trying to dodge it sometimes, or not really putting in practices that are beneficial in the long run. So this is something I want you to keep in mind, that whatever the way things used to be, it doesn't have to be the same thing for you in your entrepreneur journey, right? So this is the scope that we will be discussing. Between these 3 weeks, these are the things that we will be discussing. So most of it, actually all of it is in relation to Sri Lanka. So we'll be understanding the formalizing a business structure. That's actually the first lesson, so that you have a good understanding about what other options are available and what is the best fit for you. The second is we'll be understanding about labor laws. If you are hiring people, what are the ways we can hire, and understanding some of the very basics in the labor law aspect. Third is intellectual property. So this is also an important component. If you are a business, understanding the intellectual property, the trade name, and other patents and all of it, and how relevant is that for your business, and what should you do to protect your trademark, and so on. The fourth is we'll be talking about contracts. Because as you all know, every business engages in some form of contracts, right? Be it with regards to having suppliers or even employees, there's always an element of contracts that we do get into. And how do we really go about it without incurring big costs to the organization when we are trying to put in management practices into place? So this is basically the overview of what we will be discussing in the 3 weeks to come. So today we'll be discussing about the business structure, choosing the right fit, and also with regards to if you're hoping to have some kind of foreign investments coming maybe through your family, and how do you really go about it, right? So these are the three basic business structures that are available in Sri Lanka. So you can be a sole proprietorship, a partnership, and a company. So what we will be doing today is we will be breaking down each of the requirements for each of these structures and understanding their pros and cons. And by doing that, what could be the best fit for yourself? Right, so let me just jump straight on. So what we're hoping to do today is have a, so it's going to be more of a discussion basis, so that if you have any questions that you want to ask me, please feel free to unmute. You can stop me anytime. Or if there's anything specific that you did not understand, then just unmute and speak up, because it's such a small class, so I don't think we'll be disturbing anybody per se. And also it will make sure that I don't have to pay too much attention to the chat, right? Right, so what's a sole proprietorship? So I think the word in itself is very, it tells you what it is. Sole proprietorship is really a single owner. It's a one-person business. And this is the most prevalent business in Sri Lanka. I think more than 70% of businesses in Sri Lanka are sole proprietorship, and they are extremely easy to start up. When it is a one-person business, what's important here is that there is no differentiation when it comes to the owner and the business. So what it really means is your business has no legal entity. So the business and yourself are considered as one person. So when you are a sole proprietor, this type of business means there is no difference. So that means there are some benefits, but also there are some drawbacks which we need to be aware of. So one is when there is no differentiation, when there is no legal personality given to your business, then whenever you're doing business, say some kind of a negligent act happens, or say you want to take a loan, any of those instances, it is you personally who has to put your face forward and put your legal identity forward. So there's no way where you can take a loan under that particular business name, right? It has to be under your own individual name. So that is one of the key drawbacks in a sole proprietorship as well. The reason is your business is as wealthy as you are personally. So if the company looking at your bank accounts details feels that you do not have enough money and they don't want to give you the loan, then you will be curtailed in trying to raise capital to your business, because they would look at your personal wealth and only give you a loan looking at your ability to pay. So that can be a drawback in terms of raising capital for your business. But at the same time, there are other forms of benefits as well. One is if you are the sole owner, obviously the profit is all yours. So you don't have to share it with anybody. It's all yours. But at the same time, that also means you are responsible for all the debts of your business. So if you take a loan and you're unable to pay because your business doesn't have a separate legal identity, you are personally liable to pay this loan. So for some instance, let's say you are unable to pay this loan, then even your personal property will have to get sold to set off this loan. So it's really like an individual going to the banking institute and taking a loan. So that's why we say when you're a sole proprietorship, your liability is unlimited. So you are responsible for all the debts that you incur in running this business. And if your business doesn't have money, then the banks and the lending institutions have the opportunity to go behind your personal property and ask you to sell them in order to cover the debts that you have incurred. So this is one of the biggest drawbacks, and also something that you need to keep in mind if this is a type of business that you are looking at. So the tax rate is the same personal income tax rate. In this course, we are not going to go in deep dive into what are the tax rates and all, but if this is an area that interests you, let me know so that I can maybe share that information with you on a later date, right? We always say that sole proprietorships are very easy to start, and many we'll talk a little bit about how to start a sole proprietorship as we go on. But whenever we say it's easy to set up, please understand we're talking in terms of relativity in relation to private limited companies, in relation to public limited companies, so on and so forth. So sometimes when I tell you it's easy to set up and I tell you all the requirements of the documentation, you might wonder, is it really easy to set up, right? But in comparison to other types of business organizations, it really is easy to set up. The other benefit is that you have, as the owner, direct control of the business. So you don't necessarily need to agree with other partners or anything like that. If you have an idea and you want to do it, you can go ahead and do it. You want to take a loan, you can go ahead and do it, right? So you want to start a new marketing campaign, you want to move towards newer products, no problem. You have direct control. You do not need to run those ideas by anybody. You can easily do whatever you like for the benefit of the business. The other is that there are hardly any reporting requirements. Actually, the only reporting requirements will be that if you qualify for income tax, then you need to pay the income tax. Other than that, there's no need to have accounts submitted somewhere, get it certified, getting your accounts audited, having company secretaries, having directors. All of this is really taken out. So there's hardly any form of reporting. So that's really one of the easy. So that's why we always say sole proprietorship or single ownership is extremely easy to run as a business. When we talk about the negatives, as I told you, it's unlimited liability. So what that really means is that you are personally liable for the debts incurred when running your business organization. So that can be a drawback. The other is your ability to raise capital. So as I said earlier, your business is as wealthy as you are personally. So if you have bad credit rating with the bank, then it's going to be extremely difficult to take money or borrow money from a lending institution per se. Of course, you can borrow money from your friends and from your family, but then again, that's as wide as your network can get, right? It's not like other types of businesses where raising capital can be a little bit more easier. The other one of the drawbacks would be what really happens when the sole proprietor dies. Any idea as to what would happen to if the sole proprietor dies? What would happen to the business? So that's a question for you all. Anyone?
In case if you've willed it or nominated someone to take over, I believe it would you have to be questionable or answerable to legal bodies, I assume.
Okay, unfortunately, if you are a sole proprietorship and you pass away, the business really dies with you, right? Because remember, your business doesn't have a separate legal identity per se. So though you have a name for your business, right? When you pass away, that ownership dies. So the moment that ownership dies or that owner dies, so does that business. So yes, you can give your business through a will, through a last will to your loved one, but when that loved one gets it, that person is like a brand new owner, and they need to they would be seen as a almost a new business taking over, not really taking over as well, it's a new business doing starting again business. So if you want to take a loan, again, you're responsible for it personally, and say somehow in the middle of the business you pass away and you've taken debts, then as I told you, your debts has to be recovered from your personal property. So what that would mean is your heirs would be get their portion of the assets, provided your debts for whatever the loan that you have taken gets covered first. So there's a way in which, as a when you're a sole proprietorship, upon your death, your business really dies with you. And if you have taken debts and you have not, like if you have taken loans and you have not repaid them, then the banks will go after your heirs as well to ensure that that loan is recovered. So yes. Sorry, is there a question? Okay. Please let me know if you have a question or anything. You can just unmute and ask me anytime, right? So that really is one of the biggest drawbacks when it comes to sole proprietorship. Right. So how do we really start up a sole proprietorship in Sri Lanka? Now, in Sri Lanka, you can always start a business, without any kind of registering, and you can continue. And what's really important is, and I'm saying this because Arva, it might be relevant to you, when it comes to registering a sole proprietorship, you really do have to be a citizen of Sri Lanka, right? So if you are not a citizen of Sri Lanka, they do not allow you to register your business as a sole proprietorship. So that is an important thing to kind of note. So what do we talk about registering a sole proprietorship? So as I told you, the sole proprietorship, that particular business has no legal identity. The only legal identity they have is that of the owner, because every adult has legal rights and duties. So as an adult, the rights and duties you have is what the business will have. But the business on its own will not have a legal personality. So when we are talking about registering, we can't really register the business of a sole proprietorship. The only thing that we can do is we can go and register the name of the business, right? So if you are going by your own full name, then you don't have to register the name of the business. For example, if I go as Keshani Ranasinghe and say my business is Keshani Ranasinghe, as I'm using my full name, I do not necessarily need to go and register the name of the business, right? But if you go by a different name, for example, if it's like Keshani Salon, Malini Salon, or now I have used my name, but I have added other things on, or I just simply go with things like bakery shop or any other name like that, then it's mandatory to register the name of that business. So, so that's a little bit about the limitations in terms of registering a sole proprietorship. So what's really important is you cannot register the business. The only thing you can do is register the name of the business. So you might ask, why are we doing it? Why is it important to go and register the name of the business? Well, it provides ownership to the business name, because the business name is registered under a person's name. So the business name is given some kind of a ownership. So for example, Malini Salon belongs to Malini Fernando, right? So that's all it says. It doesn't talk about giving legal personality to the business, but it provides ownership to the business name as the business name is registered under the name of the owner. So that is why most people go and register the name, because then at least there is some kind of ownership given to this creative name that you have come up with. So how do you really go about doing this? How do you register your business name? So as I told you, when I read out the steps to you, you're going to tell me this is not so simple at all, right? But in comparison to others, it is really simple, right? So keep in mind now, because of COVID, most of these government places are closed, or they're working with skeletal employees. So because of that, it may take longer than the general process of obtaining the registration for your business name. So the way you go about it is, if you are a business within the Western province, then there is a place called the Department of Business Names Registration, Western Province, Sri Lanka. They are located in Pagoda Road, Nugekoda, right? So ideally, you can go there and collect an application. But if you do not belong to this Western province, then what you can do is you can go to your relevant divisional secretariat and obtain this application. And the application is simply called Sole Proprietorship Name Registration, right? So when you ask for that, they will be giving you the application. But before you get your application, they will be asking you a few information about the type of business that you are having. And the reason for that is, along with the application, they might give you other sets of documents or approvals that you need to obtain. So I'll give you some examples of what those are. But firstly, let me kind of guide you through this application. So what does this application really have? So it has your business name. They will also ask for the general nature of the business. So for example, if you are trading, or you're engaged in importing or exporting, or in manufacturing, then you have to clearly state the types of goods that are being traded, imported, exported, or being manufactured, right? So you just, if, for example, if you are into bringing in cosmetics, then you need to specify that you're bringing in cosmetics, right? But if it's just perfume, then you specify it's just perfume that I'm bringing in, right? So that's the kind of specification that they're really asking for. Or say you are importing pharmaceutical related products, then you specify those, that I'm bringing in pharmaceutical products, things like that. The other is that, so you've given your business name, you've also given the nature of the business that you're attached to. Then the application really calls for, where is your principal place of business? So where are you hoping to have this business? And this is important. For example, sometimes we may be operating our business from our own home, or we may be living with someone else, right? It can be parents, siblings, or we are in a marital home where the home doesn't really belong to us, but it's still the marital home. Or maybe we are on rent, or we've taken a lease, or any kind of a thing. So when you are in a location like that, it is required for you also to submit the deed to that property, and also a consent letter from the owner. So for example, if you are living with your parents and you're hoping to start this business, then what is expected is that you will submit the deed to that property, and also an affidavit by the parent who owns this property to say, so and so is my child, and I have no objection for this person to start a business of this nature from these premises for which I am the owner. So that's the kind of affidavit that you need to attach along. But let's say you are you're on rent, then again you need to produce this rent agreement, and this rent agreement has to be notarily executed. So it has to be a proper legal document, and it also need to indicate in your rent agreement or your lease agreement that you can operate a business from this particular place or premises. So those are some of the documents that you need to attach if to highlight the principal place of business that you'll be operating. You also need to state the initial capital. I'll kind of tell you why it's necessary as well, because depending on the initial capital that you're investing for this business, then the amount that is required to pay to register the name of the business becomes relevant. So I'll give you all those details as well as we go along. Then you also need to write the full name of the owner, ID number, nationality, etc. And remember, as I told you, if you are a sole proprietor and you are not of Sri Lankan nationality, then your sole proprietorship name registration will be rejected. The other thing is, of course, the date of commencement of this business. So this is a little an odd thing to have, but what they really say is within 14 days of starting your business. So really there's no other requirement, right? You can just rent out a shop, open the doors, and you can really start the business. But within 14 days of opening, that's the time period you need to go and register the name of this business. But they also extend it up to 30 days as well. But beyond that, then there is something called the late payment fee, which this late payment fee is decided by the registrar or the divisional secretaries, depending on the number of days that you are late. But ideally, within 14 days, then there is no payment required. For 30 days as well, sometimes they do allow you to register. So 14 to 30 days is the time period that they expect you to come and register the name of this business. So that's a little bit about what really does this application have. So now I know you're going to say that's a lot of details. Yes, it is, but it's still way much easier than any other types of business organization. So as I told you, the second step is really, so you've got this application, you've filled in certain details that are required, you've attached ID copies, you've attached, copies of the deed or lease agreements or rent agreements, you even put affidavits of the person who owns the property, indicating that they have no objection for you to start your business in this premises. But the next is, depending on the nature of your business, you are required to obtain certain approvals. And these approvals differ from industry to industry. So what are they? I can give you some examples. For example, if you are starting a pharmacy or a restaurant, then it is required that you obtain a PHI certificate. So this is the public health inspector needs to come and visit your premises, and they will give you a clearance that you abide by all the health guidelines given. Let's say you are having a salon, a Montessori, anything of that nature, then apart from this PHI certificate, because a salon and a Montessori would mean that as a sole owner, you will be using your own skill, then the idea is that you also need to submit qualifications that you really are skilled in this specific field to continue on with the business. So you have to attach your qualifications as well. But let's say you're hoping to have like a B&B or some kind of a accommodation kind of thing, then you also need to get police clearance as well. So how do you get to know what other approvals you need to obtain is when you go to the divisional secretary. This is where you tell the nature of the business to the person who's giving you this application, right? And that person will guide you and say, okay, you need to also get the PHI certificate. You also need to get police clearance. You also need to attach your qualifications. But these days, since it's not possible for us to go to the division secretariat or even go to the Department of Business Names Registration and obtain the application, it's possible to go to the website of the Department of Business Name Registration, Western Province, Sri Lanka. I will give you all these useful links at the end of our session today so that you always have access to these free public information that's available. And in that also, there are guidelines as to what kind of approvals are necessary, right? So now you have your application, you've attached all your approvals. Now with this, you need to go and meet the Grama Sevaka from the Grama Sevaka in the area where you're hoping to have this business. So where's your principal place of business? It's to that Grama Sevaka that you're going to go, right? So you go and meet with the Grama Sevaka, and the Grama Sevaka really gives like a one-page report. So what the Grama Sevaka will do is, the Grama Sevaka is required to visit this principal place of business. The Grama Sevaka will come there, have a look to see, do you have a little board put up? What's the location like? So the real idea here is that the Grama Sevaka personally comes and investigates to the existence of this business. So the report will indicate, yes, this is the principal place of business. I visited it. It already has some kind of a structure. It's already functioning or it's about to start and it has a board. So that's really what the Grama Sevaka's report is. The Grama Sevaka has to physically go and inspect and ensure that this business really does exist. So after the Grama Sevaka does this little physical investigation, the Grama Sevaka gives you a report. So it's all of these that you need to put together and go and hand over. Or in these days, we just register post all these relevant documents to the Divisional Secretariat or to the Department of Business Names Registration, Western Province. So if everything is in order, then they say generally within 5 working days, but there are instances that sometimes it goes back and forth because maybe we haven't put the correct applications in or the correct approvals, or we've not signed somewhere where we're supposed to sign. So I have a question for you. When we are signing this application, how do we sign it? Do we sign it under the name of the business, or do we sign it as per the name of the owner? What do you think? When we are signing the application, I'll repeat the question. Do we sign as the name of the business, or do we sign as the name of the owner? Christo, do you think you can answer that? Sorry. Christo, do you think you can answer that? Do you want me to repeat the question for you?
Yeah, I think the name of the business.
Okay. Anyone else who has another idea? How would we sign this application? Anyone else?
Since this is a sole proprietorship, isn't the owner responsible for the business name?
Right.
So
okay.
it has to come under the owner's signature.
Okay. Abdul, what do you think?
The owner signature. Yeah.
That's right. So it has to be the owner, right? And I'll tell you again why. So the reason is, as I told you, the business has no legal identity. So because the business cannot stand on its own 2 feet and appear in the eyes of the law as a business on its own right, the only way to do it is for the business to be under the owner. So it is the owner who has to sign. So one of the common mistakes in Sri Lanka is in this application, they write by Malini Salon, but that is wrong because Malini Salon has no legal capacity. The only person who has the legal capacity is the owner of the business. So you have to sign as per the owner of the business. So if the owner is Malini Fernando, you sign as Malini Fernando, the individual. So that's one of the most common reasons for an application to get rejected. So this is really about sole proprietorship. So I'm sure you would also like to know what are the price points for this, right? So I do remember, yeah, okay, I do have the details, right? So when you're registering the name of this business, as I told you, they are really interested in the initial capital, right? The reason for this interest is because depending on your initial capital, they will decide on the fee that you need to pay to register the name. So if your initial capital is less than 300,000 or less, then it is only 500 rupees. So as you can see, it's extremely affordable to register the name of the business. The other is if your initial capital is between 301 rupees and 500,000, then it is only 1,000 rupees. And if it is above 501,000 rupees, then it is 2,500. So as you can see, it's a minimum of 500 to a maximum of 2,500. So it's extremely affordable, and it's also one of the most easiest ways of registering the name of the business, right? So, so this is just to give you really the practical space for you to understand how do you register the name of the business. So all of this information that I spoke to you about, they are in some form in this website of Department of Business Names Registration, right? So it's publicly available as well. But of course, when it comes to the necessary approvals and all, it's always best to have a chat with the divisional secretariat or people attached to these departments, because then they will really specify the relevant approvals you need to take and where you need to take them from. So that's all about sole proprietorships and how do you really go about registering the name of the business. Any questions for me, or can I move on to partnerships? Okay, I'm going to take silence as move on, and I will move on, right? Let's go on to, I seem to have got stuck. Okay, partnerships, right? So what really is partnerships? Partnerships, I think the word itself will tell you, it has to have a minimum of 2, right? So obviously it cannot be less than 2, because if it's less than 2, that means it's 1, that means it's a sole proprietorship, right? So for a partnership to have effect, it has to be a minimum of 2, and there's also a maximum of 20 people. So that is the top max that you can have. But there are some exceptions given under the Companies Act. And what are these exceptions? So if you are a partnership, so I have to tell you one more thing. The term partnership is also used to describe firms as well, right? So if you hear somebody saying it's a firm, it's a partnership, it's the same thing, right? So what it means is it's a partnership, but we also use the word firm sometimes, right? So if there are a few exceptions, you can go more than 20 if you're carrying on or you have a practice where it's everyone who's involved is an attorney at law. So what's really important to understand that all of whom has to be an attorney at law. So all the partners has to be attorney at law, then you can go more than 20. You can go again more than 20 if all of them are chartered accountants. So the professions, so what they've really done is they've given 3 exceptions to 3 professions. One is attorney at law, 2 is chartered accountants, and the third is licensed stock exchange members, right? So any of these 3 professions, you can go more than 20 partners. But if it's any other business, then the maximum has to be 20 partners. So here, it's very similar again to a sole proprietorship, meaning there is no separate legal identity given to partnerships. So the owners and the business, there is no differentiation. So here again, if you are going in for a loan or anything, it will have to be under the partner's name. So there is no particular business name under which you can obtain loans, right? So generally speaking, we always encourage people to have a partnership agreement. And also under the Prevention of Frauds Ordinance, they also really encourage that if your capital, initial capital exceeds 1,000 rupees, so you know 1,000 rupees is hardly anything, right? But if it exceeds that, to please have it in writing. And they really stress on this. The reason for it is because partnerships can be very tricky because there's a lot of people attached, and also the fact that your business has no separate legal identity. So to ensure that you have mutual agreement in running this business organization is really important, and to prevent frauds from happening and to ensure disputes are mitigated, that is why a partnership agreement is encouraged. So what do you generally have in this partnership agreement? The partnership agreement will actually set out your operational guidelines. For example, some partners may be sleeping partners. Maybe they will not be actually engaged in the operational, right? And you might also allocate various responsibilities for various partners. For example, one partner may be will be responsible for finances. Another partner may be responsible for marketing. The other partner may be responsible for the operational aspect. The other partner may be responsible for bringing in, for retaining and bringing in new customers, right? So all of this is governed by your partnership agreement. The partnership will also tell you how, if you want to leave this partnership, how do you go about it? How, if you want to nominate your heir, how do you go about it? So the partnership agreement is really sets out the basics of running this business. And it's really important to have it, because otherwise it becomes really complicated. And I will tell you as we go along, why do I say it becomes really complicated, right? So how do you share the profit? So that again, we always say, please mention that in the partnership agreement, because sometimes we may be entering into this partnership as equals, or maybe we are entering in different capacities. Maybe there is one partner who is bringing in more initial capital than the others. So then that partner may have a bigger role in the way the business direction of this company is taken forward, right? So the profit is really shared depending on the kind of initial capital that you have invested into this partnership. Here again, an unfortunate thing is liability. It is unlimited. And the worst part of this is that you are jointly liable for whatever your partners do as well. So I'll give you an example. Let's say there is 5 of us and we are in a partnership. And let's say I decide to go and take a loan from a bank, and for some odd reason, I do not have your consent to do this, but I still go ahead and do this, and I pump the money into the business. Then let's say for some reason I am unable to pay this loan, then the bank has the opportunity to sue all 5 of us in the event I am unable to pay. Because you are, as partners, you are also responsible for some of my negligence, for some of the work that I do for which you all don't agree. So there are things like that. So that's why we say in a partnership, you are jointly liable. So trust is a very important thing in partnerships. And the other, of course, is the partnership agreement. Because if we have a partnership agreement, whilst the lending institution can sue all 5 of us as partners and try to recover from our personal property, at the same time, it also gives you the right to sue me in a separate action for the fact that I have gone against the decision of the partnership, and I have done this alone in my own I've taken my own individual decision, and it may offer you some kind of recourse in recovering some of the money that was taken by y'all by this bank, right? So that is the primary reason that we always say to have a partnership agreement, because it clearly sets out the boundaries in which this business organization will be run. The other is that as I told you, the Prevention of Frauds Ordinance really says that it has to be in writing if the capital exceeds 1,000. But this, it has to be in writing, is not applicable when it comes to third parties suing the partnership. So even if it's not in writing, the third parties still have a leg to stand on and sue the partnership. And also people who are working in this partnership, if their payments have not been paid, so again, they're a third party, they can claim from the partners, right? But if it's between partners, right now, like this incident that I'm telling you about, then the first primary thing we have to do is we have to go to courts and try and ascertain whether we initially had a partnership. We have to prove that. And so that is really why we always say to have a partnership agreement, because otherwise you are liable for the actions of your partners. So the partnership agreement really curtails some of these disadvantages that may arise because of this partnership, right? The other is for when it comes to tax, again, it's the partnership income tax rates are there. Again, as I've told you, if you're interested in knowing that, I can share with you that kind of data separately, right? So if we look at some of the advantages and some of the disadvantages in having a partnership, it's far more easy to set up again, and I'll tell you why I say this. Of course, it's a little bit more complicated than a sole proprietorship, but of course, way more easier than a public limited liability company or even a private limited company. One of the biggest pros or advantages would be that you have shared control. So sometimes we may be experts in our own right only in a specific area, right? But when there are partners, there's a way in which you can share the control, share diverse knowledge, and ensure that the best is given for the business. For example, some may be really good at finance, the other may be really good at marketing, the other may be really good at in terms of the legal process, the other may be really good at operations. So when all of these come in, it really enriches the business as opposed to a sole proprietor who really has to rely on their own self-knowledge to run this business, right? The other advantage is your ability to raise capital. So if you're an individual, you just have your resources to bring in. But if it's a partnership, all 5 of us will be bringing in different, have the ability to raise capital because there's 5 people or there's 20 people, right? So your ability to raise capital is far more advantageous than a sole proprietor. But of course, it is less in terms of a private limited company or a public limited company. But generally speaking, you really do have the ability to raise capital. One of the disadvantages, as I told you, is this unlimited liability because you are responsible as a partner to all the debts incurred for this business, because this business has no particular legal identity, right? All it has is the owner's legal identity. So because of that, your personal property is liable in the event the partnership assets are not able to pay the debts that it has incurred. Secondly, joint liability. So meaning again, we are all liable as partners and we are all liable to it unlimitedly. So the action of one partner, which may be in detriment, will have an effect on the other partners as well. Because as remember, it is a partnership. We are all equals in this. So we are jointly liable for the negligence of the business, some of the decisions we take, and also for the debts that we incur. The other disadvantage, of course, is partner conflicts, right? So because there are lots of people involved, obviously we will have our own opinions, own ways of doing things. So it becomes a little bit more complicated and we may have conflict. But as I told you, all of these are things that can be rectified to a certain extent if we do have a partnership agreement. So I have a question for you all now. What happens in the event one partner dies? So say there are 5 partners and one partner dies. What happens to this particular partnership? Any ideas? So I can repeat the question. There are 5 partners in this partnership. What happens if one partner dies? What happens to the partnership? That's the question for you all.
Gayani, the business will run as it is with the new profit ratio.
A business will run as it is with the new
Profit ratios and new agreement.
Okay, all right. Anyone else? Do you agree with Abdul or anyone else?
Not entirely agreeing with him, because the involvement of a partner, either financially as an investor or as a whatever contribution, he has to, or rather his nominees have to receive the benefits of it. So either he can be, his share can be bought up, like as in sold to the rest of the partners, and his share can be bought out. And then they can carry forward with a newer policy or whatever between the partners.
Okay, all right. Also, Arva gave in a little bit more detail on how it will happen. Okay, anyone else? Christo, anything else? Or do you agree with them?
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay, so let me explain what really happens, right? There are a couple of things that happen. Okay, and one thing is that when a partner dies, that partnership comes to an end. And how is that? It's because, remember, there are 5 people in a partnership, and say one person dies, then that partnership comes to an end. So if you want to transfer this particular partner's shares, right? You want to transfer the shares of this dead person's then generally you cannot transfer without the consent by the other partners, and generally these are put in the partnership agreement. But either way, let's say one particular person dies, then that partnership comes to an end, because the partnership was between A, B, C, D, and E. And if E passes away, then it's considered as a new partnership, and that this partnership has now ended. So let's say E's child is going to take over and run it, then we need to enter into a fresh partnership agreement. So we will now be having a fresh partnership agreement, a fresh partnership with A, B, C, D, and E's child, right? But let's say we are not adding on, but we're just going to continue with A, B, C, D, right? Still, it's a new partnership because the earlier partnership had E as well, right? So because of this, so this is this lack of continuity of the business that keeps on coming up when you don't have a separate legal identity given to your business. So this is one of the drawbacks really in a partnership. So the moment one partner retires, one partner dies, right? And say you're adding on a new partner, or that partner's child or wife or heir is coming in again, then it's considered as a brand new partnership. Yes, of course, you can carry on with the business name, but the partnership has changed because the owners have changed. And as I told you, this particular business has no legal identity. The legal identity is only vested in the owner. So the moment one owner passes away, dies, retires, any of it, or even just leaves the organization, right? Maybe they've had enough of the business and they want to just leave. Still, that partnership comes to a close at that point, and you have to go in for a brand new partnership agreement. Right, so these are some of really the drawbacks in a sole proprietorship and even in a partnership, because there is no legal identity or legal personality given to the business. So that's actually the scenario there. If I move on to how do we really register a partnership, can we go about doing that, right? Was my answer clear, or do any of you want me to?
Gayatri, I have a small doubt. So now I understood this partnership thing where there's no legal aspect, right? But say, for example, if there are 4 partners who have invested in some business jointly, like, each one has put the same amount of money invested in it, and one of them dies. So then what happens to the money invested? Does the family get that share back, or it's like nullified completely?
No, it doesn't get nullified. The heirs will receive that whatever the assets. So what happens is that the assets of that business will go back into, so if it's an assets of the partnership, and whatever that is there for that particular owner's name will go into the heirs. But if you want this partnership to continue, then you have to draw up a fresh partnership agreement with fresh clauses coming in, saying now the new partner is A, B, C, D, and E's child, EZ. Right? Because that earlier partnership is reliant on the owners. So the moment one owner dies, retires, anything, you need to go back into a fresh partnership. There is a tendency in Sri Lanka to simply continue as you go along, right? Like, it just continues. Nobody does anything. The child now has come.
For family businesses, I think that's what happens mostly, I guess.
Yes, but all of these things unravel when you come across a problem, right? So for let's say, for example, there is some disagreement between the partners and they want to take it to a different avenue. They want to go for a new market. But let's say the old partners don't want to do that. They're very happy with the way the business was running, right? So that's when all of these problems come up as to when did the old partnership end and when did this new partnership commence and what are the rules governing this new partnership, right? Then this becomes a real big problem. And that is why we always say when somebody steps down, dies, whatever, that old partnership is dead, right? And you have to go on for a new partnership. And this is really where a lot of the problems occur, because people just assume it will continue, but actually the death or any change in the owners brings the death of that partnership because the business has no legal standing. So it's always recommended to go in for a fresh partnership agreement.
Thank you, Gayani.
You're
Got it.
welcome. Right. Any other questions? Okay, so I will move on to how do we register a partnership? Okay, so actually it's very similar to the name registration of a sole proprietorship. But here the difference is you can register the partnership, right? You can register the partnership, not only the name, you can register the partnership, but it still does not give the legal standing or a separate legal identity to your partnership. So here it's the same process. So I'm not going to go over the same details again, but the only difference that will come in here is when you're talking about the names of the owners, it has to be everybody, all your partners, all their identity, card numbers, right? Then where you're going to have the principal place of business, those same things will happen. The only difference is here it will be all of their IDs, all of their names, and all of them have to sign. So that's the only difference. So the application is a little different to accommodate all of these relevant aspects. But other than that, it's the same process. You need to get necessary approvals, and it differs from industry to industry. You need to meet with your Gram Sevaka, you need to get that report and submit it. So it's the same process. The difference comes in putting all the owners' names, right? So I'm not going to go into much detail on it because we spoke in detail when it came to sole proprietorship. So what's the price or the fee that you need to pay for registering a partnership? It's the same fee rate that I discussed with you, a maximum of 500, sorry, a minimum of 500 to a maximum of 2,500, depending on your initial capital. So all of that remains the same, right? So I'm going to move on to companies, because I think this is an important thing that we really need to know. And there are really 5 possible ways of having a company. And we are going to spend some time understanding 3 of them, which are relevant to an entrepreneur. The other 2, I am going to talk about it just a little bit. But if you're seriously interested in any of the other 2, let me know. I will always share details with you, right? So there are 5 types: a private limited company, a limited company, a public limited company, an unlimited company, a limited by guarantee company, right? So I'm going to get 2 of them out of the way, and so that we are able to focus on 3 that are really relevant for entrepreneurs. The 2 that I'm going to speak about now is this concept of unlimited company. So this term unlimited liability is what really crops in when you talk about an unlimited company. So generally, nobody wants to go into a business having unlimited liability. Of course, if you're a sole proprietor or a partnership, you have no choice. It is unlimited liability. But definitely, if you're starting a company, this is not a road you want to go down. And practically in Sri Lanka, there are hardly any companies that have got registered as an unlimited liability company, right? So this is where your liability is unlimited. So no one would want to do that when trying to get into a business, right? The other is limited by guarantee. So limited by guarantee are companies that are formed for the benefit of the public. So really it has a specific objective, and that objective can be, it could be charity, it could be aimed at uplifting particular sport, or it could be with regards to art, with regards to science, with regards to religion, or it can even be to promote commerce. So what we mean by is sometimes people put up charitable kind of foundations to promote small and medium businesses, right? So these go as limited by guarantee. And really one of the biggest things here is you are restricted in using your profits. You can only use your profits to further the objectives. And what are those objectives? It's to promote commerce, art, science, religion, or charity. So that means none of the shareholders can take profits home. So they get no dividends, nothing, right? So all of the profits that is generated is put right back onto the specific objective of the company. So most companies that are not for profit, like NGOs, INGOs, they are registered as limited by guarantee companies. So you are not permitted to share your profits with its members. So that is a very important aspect. So if you are interested in setting up any kind of a charitable, or your objective is to promote commerce in small and medium businesses, or it could be even something very specific, like you want to protect and promote traditional crafts, right? Then you can have a limited by guarantee, or it could be in relation to science. You want to develop the capacity for laboratories, or the capacity for better educationists in the field of science, right? So any of those kind of objectives, or it can be for the promotion of a particular religion, or it can be for charity, like it can be you want to have an elders home, a children's home, or persons with disabilities, you want to have a charity, then this is the company for you, right? And so as I told you, you cannot use the profits, you cannot share the profits as well. The only way you can use the profits is to further the objectives that were set out. So these are considered as limited by guarantee companies. So I'm going to jump in now to the other three companies that really I think is important for an entrepreneur, right? But if there is other information, maybe you are an entrepreneur that's interested in setting up a limited by guarantee company or anything like that, as I always tell you, please feel free to reach out and I will give you the other necessary kind of informations. Right. So when we're talking about companies, it's really important to understand this concept called juristic person. What is that, right? Because when you are a company, your company is given a legal personality. So earlier, when we had a sole proprietorship or when we had a partnership, remember our business organization, our business organization did not have its own legal personality. The only person who had a legal personality was the owner. That's why it was the owner or owners' names that came forward in this business organization. But when it comes to a company, companies have a legal personality just like humans or just like a natural person. So when we say natural person, what we mean is people like you and I, right? We are natural persons who have a legal identity. So we have legal rights and we have legal responsibilities or obligations as adults. So similarly, this legal personality can be given to a company when a company is incorporated. So what we mean by a company is incorporated is it simply means there's a set of documents, we fill these set of documents, we go and register it at the registrar of companies, then this company is born. The moment this company is born, legally we call it as incorporated. We don't say a company is born, but colloquially we can always say that's the date a company is born, right? So when this happens, when a company is incorporated, then that company has similar rights and duties just like a natural human being, right? So now you begin to have companies who have a juristic person or a company that has a legal personality similar to that of a human being. So you are a body corporate with separate legal identity and personality. And this is really key to understanding companies. So when it's a company, be all the 5 types that we spoke about, this company has a separate legal identity, a separate legal personality. So what it means is you can sue this company, and this company can sue other people, and this company can also hold property, just like a human being, right? So it's very much like a human. You have legal rights and legal duties. So this is called a juristic person, right? So I've given a little example, right? So if A and B form a registered company, and we call this company AB Limited, right? The separate legal personality of AB Limited is created at formation, right? So the moment you incorporate, you get a juristic person by the name of AB Limited, okay? And A and B can now, right? They can be appointed as directors of the company. They can also enter into contracts on behalf of AB Limited, right? Because they are the agents of this AB Limited company, as they are directors of this company. So whatever these rights and duties that come under these contracts will belong to AB Limited and not to AB as individuals, right? Because now we have actually given birth to a legal personality. We have given a legal identity to this company. So if there's any kind of thing in this contract, so for example, let's say this contract is about supplying sugar, right? And say we were not able to supply this sugar on time to the required quality, right? And what can our customer do? The customer can simply sue AB Limited and not really the directors of that company. But had we been a sole proprietorship, then the person that will get sued will be the owner. If we were a partnership, the persons that will get sued are all the partners of that partnership, right? Because there is no separate legal identity given to that business organization. Is this clear? Because this is a very important aspect when we are talking about companies. Is it clear, or do you need any kind of further explanation from me? Please feel free to ask me to repeat if you didn't get it. Okay, so in the absence of any questions, I will move forward. So when you're a company, always remember, we have a separate legal identity given to the company, right? And I'm not going to go on into details about some of the case law and all that made this happen, right? But what's important for us to understand as entrepreneurs is that if it's a company, then your company has a legal personality, a legal identity on its own. So we're going to talk about the private limited company. So this is a very common term. I'm sure all of you have heard it, right? So generally, how do you know if a company is private limited? Is simply whatever the name of that company, it will end in the words within brackets, either private limited, or within brackets, they may say PVT, close bracket, LTD, right? So this is how you know whether a particular company is private limited company, because it will be at the end of that company name. So there are certain guidelines when it comes to the ownership. So the ownership in Sri Lanka, you can have a minimum of 1 shareholder. So whenever we are talking about companies, and ownership, we will be using the term shareholder. And I'll explain as to why we are talking about shareholders and what shares are. We'll explain a little bit, we'll explore that because that's going to be important for all or any company that we are going to set up, right? So you need a minimum of one owner, or we call it shareholder. We need minimum of one shareholder and one director. And you can have a maximum of 50 shareholders. So can this shareholder be the director? Yes, you can. Can it be AB shareholder and XY director? Yes, it's possible, right? So that's all possible. So even a single owner or a single shareholder can incorporate a private limited company, right? So as we spoke earlier about the juristic persons, your company now has a separate legal identity from the owner or from the share owner. So the owner and the owners and business are completely separate, okay? So one of the things that we need to understand is, how does this shareholder, how do we issue shares? So I want to give you a little brief about it so that it's clear to you all what this shareholding is all about, right? So generally when we are starting a business, we need to invest some kind of a capital. We call this like the initial capital that we set up, right? So let's say we want to put 10,000 rupees and we want to start this private limited company. Say it's just two owners are going to put in this capital. So what we do is, we will say we actually need 10,000 initial capital amount. What we will do is, we will issue shares for this 10,000 rupees. So we can simply say one share is 1 rupees and that we are issuing 10,000 shares, right? And the owners could buy these shares. So when they buy these shares, they are buying ownership to this particular company. So they are also putting on initial capital to this company. So here, one owner, let's just simply call him X, might buy 5,000 shares, giving 5,000 rupees. And the owner Z will do the same. So now you have two shareholders who put in 5,000 rupees, and now they have 5,000 shares each. So now we have hit the initial capital that we require to start this private limited company. Of course, you don't have to go equally. You can go 7,000, 3,000, 8,000, 2,000. It doesn't matter. Whatever the split that you want, right? So you have the ability to also give the share value. So you can price it at 1 rupee, you can price it at 2 rupees, you can price it at 10,000 rupees, right? So the share value also, you can price it at the price you would like. So this is really how you get ownership to a particular company. So here the profit is shared amongst the shareholders depending on the number of shares or the number of shares that you have taken, right? And that is how the profits will be shared amongst the shareholders. When it comes to liability, this is the most important thing, right? As a shareholder or as an owner, your liability is limited to the value of the shares invested by you. So if I invested only 5,000 rupees, then my liability is limited to 5,000 rupees. So if the company runs into hard time and they are unable to pay their debts, then as a shareholder, as an owner, I am only liable to pay 5,000 from my pocket because I am limited to the value of the shares invested by the shareholder. Okay, so as you know, this was not there for sole proprietorship or even for a partnership. So that's an important aspect to remember. Okay, so these are the pros and cons, right? Limited liability, as we spoke, and the other is you get a real professional recognition from your customers, from your suppliers, right? This is not because when it comes to a sole proprietorship or even to a partnership, there is really no professional appearance to your organization. Your organization will just go as Malini Salon, okay? But if it's a private limited company, then it's a little different. You might have Malini Salon, private limited. So that also tells your or your customers that your business continuity is strong. So even if the owner dies, your business will still continue, right? And that is the professional recognition that is being given to this business. Of course, there is some form of reporting, right? Reporting means there's a lot of, like you need to appoint directors, you need to have a company secretary, you need to get your accounts audited, and you need to submit these accounts to the registrar of companies on an annual basis. In your first year of operation, within 18 months, you can file it, but after that, every year you have to file these documents, right? So there is some form of reporting. And if you ask why is it necessary that we need to report it? It's simply because, remember, your company has a separate legal identity. It is almost like a person with rights and duties. So somebody has to keep an eye on it and ensure that this private limited company, this legal person, is adhering to the legal requirements. So that is the purpose of reporting these to the registrar of companies, right? So you will have, if you're hoping to go to a private limited company, please note that there is some cost involved because you need to have proper accounting procedures. So even if you're going to do it on your own on Excel, yes, that's fine, but you still need to have every single receipt. You need to keep them properly organized, and you also need to know what are your expenses, where's your income. So you need to keep a balance, a proper check on it, and you need to also submit all these documents for an auditor who needs to prepare the accounts that we will be filing at the Register of Companies. One of the disadvantages is that you cannot raise capital from the public, right? So what it really means is if you want to raise capital, what you can do is you can reach out individually to anyone you want and you can issue shares, but not public at large. That's what it means. So say I initially started my company with just myself, one shareholder, but as I grow my business, I see another potential and I would like for that person also to be a shareholder, then I can issue shares and I can get that person to invest in my company, right? So you can do that along the way, but these are individuals who you've specifically identified, but not from public at large, where you ask people to invest in your business. There also could be certain limitations on transferability of shares. So what do we mean by transferability of shares? So as I told you, shareholders have shares, and can you transfer them, right? Actually the directors have a right to refuse to register the transfer, right? So you might say, no, I would now like to transfer my shares to my child or to my friend, but the directors do have the capacity to put a stop to it and say, no, we don't want you to transfer the shares. So there is some kind of restrictions when it comes to transferability of shares. But as I told you, individually, you can issue shares to anyone you want if you want to raise capital, but not from the public at large. So how do we register a private limited company? So this is how it goes, right? Right now, what we have is an online registration process. So really, it's super easy. it's super easy to register or to incorporate your private limited company or any company, right? When it comes to a private limited company, these are the 3 steps that you need to follow. The first thing that you need to do is you can do a name search. So if you go to the Registrar of Companies website, you can do a name search and you can reserve a company name. So let's say I have the idea of registering a particular name. Let's just simply call it Paris Fashions, right? And I want to use this name and I want to see whether someone else has this name. So you can do a name search, see whether this particular name is being used, and if it's not, you can go ahead and reserve this company name for yourself. So you can generally reserve it to a period of 3 months only, right? So within these 3 months, you have the opportunity to get the balance of the documents and all prepared, and you can submit the documents for online registration or incorporation, right? So there are certain restrictions when it comes to names, and this is important for us to remember. So we can't have identical names with another company that's already there, right? So let's say like I think the things even like Burgers King, right? So this is extremely identical to another company that's there, right? So you may not get permission to have a name like that. You can't also have a name that suggests some kind of patronage, either by the president or even a government department. So you can't use things like president, presidential, right? So those words are restricted words and you're not allowed to use them. You can't also use anything that might suggest it to be a local authority or a municipality, right? So words like municipal, incorporated, cooperative, society, those are kind of restricted as to who can use it. I'm not saying it's not possible for you to use it, but there is some kind of restrictions imposed on it, right? You can't also have any connection, suggest any connection with the government. So things like national, state, Sri Lanka, right? So if you're using these names, then the Registrar of Companies will be scrutinizing your name to see what else does it mean. If it's something fun, then they might let it go. But if it's something that maybe make the public believe it is some kind of a governmental or state-owned company, then they will restrict the use of that name. Okay. The second step is there are a couple of forms that you need to fill out and submit. So there's, as I told you, an application for company registration. So you will add on to that. It's called Form 1. So you have Form 1, 18 and 19. So in a company, as I told you, you need to appoint directors. So in the company registration, what you will have is who are the shareholders, how many shares have they bought, what's the value of a share, what's the total initial capital, those kind of details will be there for shareholders, their ID details, their names, things like that. Form 18 really has the consent and certificate of the directors. So if you are forming a company, it's important to have directors allocated. So in this instance, who are the directors and the details, and that they consent to being directors. So as I told you, why answer it? Let me ask that from you. Can shareholders be directors of a company? Any ideas? Can shareholders be directors of a company?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, right. So it's but either way, you have to give consent, right? I consent to being a director. So that's what Form 18 is all about. Form 19 is, as I told you, you need to appoint a company secretary. So the company secretary can be some lawyers are company secretaries. So you can appoint a friend of yours or someone you know as a company secretary, or there are other qualifications that makes individual company secretaries. So you can appoint a person like that. Or you can simply go to a company secretary firm and you can appoint. But either way, they need to be giving their consent. Yes, I am the company secretary for this company. So these are the forms. So since it's an online process, you just fill it up and you scan it and you upload it, right? So that's basically the process in submitting these documents these days. And it's super easy, but you have to make sure that you like filled it correctly. Otherwise, this back and forth can be quite problematic. The other that you need to submit is an articles of association. So really, articles of association are, they have the internal regulation of the management of the affairs of the company and how you're going to conduct your business. So how are we going to issue shares, methods of holding meetings, what's the quorum like, how do we get rid of a director? All of these kind of details are really there in the articles of association. You can either draft your own articles of association. So this is really where your company secretary will help you to draft it, or you can simply adopt the model articles of associations that are already on that website, right? So you can also just take that and submit that. So really the process has been made extremely easy. Then you need to give the registration fee. In my next slide, I have the fee structure so that you'll get an idea of the expense that will be incurred. And the other is when all of this is submitted, you receive your certificate of incorporation. So let me just quickly give you the fee structure. So this is the fee structure as of today, right? So I won't go into detail of it because it's self-explanatory and it kind of tells you the kind of cost that you will incur, right? So for articles of association, it's 2,000, application is 4,000, consent of directors 2,000, right? Into the number of directors, right? Consent and so forth. But if you're registering an unlimited company, how much is it? Limited by guarantee is 30,000, so on and so forth. So this is really the fee structure. This is public information. You can easily go to the company registrar and you can get all of these details. I'm going to move on because I'm also conscious of time. Right. So we've spoken about the private limited company. The next that we have is this limited company. What's the limited company? Limited really means you are not listed on the stock exchange. That's the most important thing to remember. Again, minimum of one shareholder, maximum of, there's no maximum number of shareholders in this limited company. So limited means you are not listed in the stock exchange. So again, when it comes to any company, the owner and the business have separate legal identities, right? So one of the key things here is because you are a limited company, so whether you are going to list in the stock exchange or not, whether you're going to be a limited company or whether you're going to be a public limited company, it largely depends on the economic aspirations of the company. So depending on your economic aspirations, if you don't want to list on the stock exchange, then you will go for a limited company. So this really means you can raise capital from the public, and there are certain kinds of regulations you need to follow, right? There is something called the Prospectus Rules, so that really tells you the kind of information that you need to provide to the public to encourage public to buy shares from your company, right? And there is also something called the solvency test. So here is again, you cannot share dividends with your shareholders unless you're absolutely confident that you are a financially viable company and that you have enough money to cover your debts and day-to-day operational costs. When that is called solvency test, when that is established, then only can you share your dividends with your shareholders. This is again put as protection measures for the public who have invested in your company. So here you can identify a limited company by the simple thing that that particular company would end in limited, the word limited, or LTD. So then you know this is not a private limited company, this is a limited company where they have the ability to raise capital from the public, but they are not listed in the stock exchange. So that is what's important. So as I told you, the prospectus rules apply. So that means you need to publish a booklet, and the booklet will have details pertaining to the business, the RIP accounts, and there'll also be a report by the auditor, which will indicate that the company is stable, so that public won't invest in a dud company, right? So those are some of the pros and also the cons when it comes to a limited company. The other that we have is public limited company. What do we mean by public limited company? This is a company that is listed on the stock exchange, right? So they have the ability to raise capital. They also have an extreme ease in transferring shares. So if you are a company, a public limited company, you want the ability. So the fundamental principle here is that you can easily transfer shares, right? And what it really does is you have the ability to liquidate the shares that you have, and so you buy the primary shares, and you also have the ability to quickly liquidate, and then a secondary shareholder will be coming on, and you can keep on doing this, right? So the ease of transferability of shares means you can really raise capital, right? And this is one of the key things when it comes to a public limited company. And also there are certain guidelines that you really need to follow if you are a public limited company. So there is something called the listing rules of the Colombo Stock Exchange Commission, right? So you need to follow those listing and those specific listing rules that are there. And you also need to, there's also a concept called continuation of the listing rules, right? So apart from listing it for the first time, there's also a requirement when as it's continuing on, you need to follow those rules as well. And the registrar of, the Colombo Stock Exchange Commission keeps a very good tab of what is happening when it comes to public limited companies, as it is the public that is investing their money. So these listing rules are very important aspect. So here, when you are issuing shares, it's important to remember that there are different types of shares in an organization. So this is not only relevant to public limited companies, but companies as a whole. So you can have ordinary shares, preference shares, non-voting shares, you can even have employee shares. Ordinary shares really means the risk-taking shares of the company. So if the company fails financially, it's the ordinary shareholders that carry the main financial burden of the company. Similarly, if the company performs well, greater the financial reward that is enjoyed by persons having ordinary shares. If it's preferential shares or preference shares, this is an important class of shares, and it carries some preferential rights in relation to other classes of shares. So these preferential rights can be in relation to dividends, it can be in relation to cumulative dividends, or it could also be in relation to the right to participate in the distribution of dividends in excess and even in beyond of their preferential and cumulative dividends. So it's all about giving preference to these kind of shareholders. The other that is also common, that many global companies that are trying to be ethical, they have this concept called employee shares. So employee shares is really where you issue shares to your employees under an employee share option scheme. So restrictions can be imposed especially when it comes to employee shares with regards to transferability and with regards to voting rights, right? So it could be the employee shares can even be ordinary shares, or it can even be preferential shares. So it's up to you to give what, but the employee shares simply means that the employees of your organization also have a stake in your company, right? So that's a little bit in terms of shares, and that is relevant to any of the companies or any 5 of the companies that we were speaking about. The other that I like to really talk to you about is a foreign company engaging in business in Sri Lanka. So there are actually 4 ways a foreign company who wants to engage in business in Sri Lanka can go about, right? Firstly, you can directly provide your goods or your services without a place of business in Sri Lanka, right? So you don't have to have a place of business in Sri Lanka. An example would be Amazon office in UK will directly ship goods to customers in Sri Lanka. So this is one method, right? Directly providing goods and services. The second is you're directly providing goods and services, but you have a place of business in Sri Lanka, right? So what we mean by you have a place of business is either you have a branch office, a project office, a liaison office, or at least there is a representative office in Sri Lanka. So some kind of presence in Sri Lanka is there. So basically, you're a foreign company, right? And what you do is you come and register yourself as an overseas company, right? So I'll give you an example. Say you are HSBC, right? You are a company incorporated in Hong Kong. But what you do is you will register yourself as an overseas company, right? And then you can directly provide goods and services in Sri Lanka. So you can have branch offices and continue your business in Sri Lanka. But if you are a company that is engaging in, it can be commercial. So what we mean by commercial is banking, right? Or you're engaged in trading, or industrial. Industrial means some kind of manufacturing activity. And you are going to do this by having a place of business, then there's a minimum investment requirement, and that is $200,000 or equivalent that in foreign currency. So that is the minimum investment required if you want to directly provide goods and services and you want to have a place of business in Sri Lanka. If you don't have a place of business in Sri Lanka, there is no minimum investment set out. Okay. The third way is that you can have a subsidiary incorporated in Sri Lanka. So that means any person who is resident outside of Sri Lanka, this means even a company, can invest, can acquire, or even hold all classes of shares, right, issued by companies incorporated in Sri Lanka. But you have to follow the Foreign Exchange Act here, right? So there are certain sectors where you can't have 100% foreign ownership. Certain classes you can have, right? So I'll give you some of the limitations so that you understand, right? There is no minimum investment required unless you're going to engage in a retail trade. So retail trade means, for example, Walmart wants to come and have a subsidiary incorporated in Sri Lanka, then you are in the retail trade, you need a minimum investment of USD 5 million or equivalent that in another acceptable currency. Okay. As I told you, you can have 100% foreign ownership, but in some sectors it is limited. So there's a limit of 40%. So the foreign investor can only hold 40% of the stated capital, or they need to get special approval from the BOI, Board of Investment, right? So what are they? If you are into growing or processing tea, rubber, coconut, cocoa, rice, sugar, spices, then either you need BOI approval or the maximum that you can have is 40% ownership of that stated capital. Okay. The other is if you are in the education field, shipping agencies, mass communications, travel agencies. So these are some of the limitations that restricts you to 40% or require approval from the board BOI, right? Then there are certain things where you cannot start at all without first obtaining permission. And what is that? If you are going to manufacture arms and ammunition, explosives, military vehicles, if you are going to manufacture alcohol, narcotics, right? Or if you are in relation to air transportation, or you're going to produce or manufacture coins and currency, or even engage in lotteries. So these, even before you start up, first you need to obtain the permission. And once you obtain the permission, then only can you incorporate yourself as a subsidiary. Okay. The fourth that we have is you can be either a local agent or a franchise. So you don't want to invest in a subsidiary in Sri Lanka, but you can enter into an agency or a franchise agreement with a Sri Lankan company, right? The Sri Lankan company has no shareholding linked to the foreign company. And it's the Sri Lankan company who's responsible for employing, for retaining and carrying employees and also carrying on the business. So for example, like McDonald's or Taco Bell or Pizza Hut or any of these are franchise agreements or where there's a local agent and that local company is the one who has this franchise agreement or the agency, and they will be responsible for hiring employees and carrying on the business. So this is in a nutshell how the different types of business organizations that are there. And the last deck that I kind of spoke to you was with regards to if you have foreign investments, how do you go about it, right? How do you, what are the limitations, what are the restrictions, and what are the permissions that you need to obtain? So I am going to stop at that. I think we have 5 more minutes. Are there any questions for me? Yes, so that's the end of my slide deck. Any questions for me or any comments or anything that you would like for me to explain? Yes, tell me.
I have one question. Let's say I have registered as a private limited company already,
Okay.
and I have hoped to get an agency from foreign company.
You're hoping to get an agency?
Yeah, agency deal in Sri Lanka. So can we go with the local? We have already a private limited registration now. So can we do as it is, or do we need to register as some other?
Well, you can obtain, you can go for a agency agreement.
Agreement, right?
Yes, you can go for a franchise agreement or so basically you are already registered now as a private limited company.
Yes.
All you now need to do is be the local agent. Okay, so you either get into an agency agreement or a franchise agreement with them. So franchise agreements are generally when we are putting up like a restaurant or like a chain of something. But like say you're the agent for a particular brand of toiletware, Groher or something, like you want to be the local agent for Groher, right? Like then you will get into an agency agreement with that particular company abroad. So you don't need to, this is not another type of company. You already have your private limited company. But if you want to engage in business with a foreign company, this is what you need to do. Just an agency agreement will be fine.
Okay, thanks.
And Gayani, I have a small doubt. Now, suppose if you've registered as a partnership, right? That's the second this thing. So say from there, if you later on want, like your company has grown and you want to register as a private limited, can you do that? Or there's like,
Yes.
you can upgrade?
Of course you can. You
You
be
can.
many companies initially start as partnerships and sole proprietorship. And as they feel their business is growing and they feel they're ready to go in for this structure and incur this cost, then they convert to a private limited company. So it's always possible to jump from one to the other and to upgrade.
Right.
Yes.
And also, is it possible for you to share the previous slide, please? I just wanted a little detail in that.
This one?
Yeah. So in that, this foreign company engaging in business here. So this one, they don't need a partner here as such, right?
You don't. You really don't. You can be a foreigner and you can own 100% of the share capital in most sectors, right? In most sectors you can, but except some of these limitations that I spoke.
That is local. What is affecting the local businesses, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So if you are into clothing, okay, you want to have a clothing brand, you want to have a shoe brand, you are going to be, food, right? It's fine. Or in relation to jewelry or anything, it's fine. It's except for some of these that we've said, unless you're not like a retail, like you want to have a supermarket chain or like a big clothing store chain.
It has to be a one-stop shop, basically, not like multiple chains of it.
Yes. But generally, you definitely have the flexibility to do that, and that's why you will see most foreigners have 100% ownership in some of the sectors. So food and clothing.
Like I know a lot of foreigners who've invested in land and they own those places here and they're running them as boutique hotels. So I mean that again comes under.
You can't own land as a foreigner unless you have.
I am aware, but the thing is, these are not in proper Colombo. They are away, and they also say like, okay, a German-owned land for sale currently, like off late since the past 1 year because of COVID. I've come across a lot of these, so that's why I'm trying to clarify how does that work. Or is the agency trying to sell them because it's affiliated with a foreign partner? I don't know, but they're only mentioning it as a foreign partner, like a foreigner-owned place, basically.
Right. A long time ago, Sri Lanka did permit foreigners to own property, and there was a 300% tax. That was a very long time ago. But currently, no foreigner can buy property.
Yeah, that I'm aware of the current
so this situation that you're saying, maybe it's a property that was bought a long time ago that is owned by a foreigner and they're selling. But you can, you don't necessarily need to own that plot of land to have a boutique hotel, right? You can have a partner, maybe you rented it out, or maybe it's under your partner's name that the property is, but the business can be fully in your name, where you simply give a rent to your partner. Right? So you can always rent out property. So the business of having this boutique hotel can be 100% foreign ownership. There's no problem in that.
Okay, got it.
What's also important is we are here talking about you already having, if you have already a business in another country and you want to bring that down to Sri Lanka, then it's different, right? But if you are a foreigner and you want to do business in Sri Lanka, you want to set up it, then it's possible.
Yeah, maybe I think these guys might be having hotels abroad, like, boutique hotels abroad. So maybe for them, then that investment value, say $5 million, I think could be a possibility.
Yes, correct.
Okay, but I got that clarification now.
Yeah. Also remember the 5 million is for retail trade. Huh? So that's like Walmart, things like that. It's not for hotels.
Okay, so this would be something like for IKEA or something like that. It would work.
Yes, correct.
I assume.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It was a very interesting lecture.
Thank you. I hope it was practically useful for you all. That's I think
No,
important.
it very much is actually provided a lot of clarifications because I mean, you had done something similar like earlier, but that was much more brief. Today it was more in detail. So, you know,
Correct.
this actually opened up a lot of thinking, I would say.
So thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry I took extra 5 minutes as well. So this is all about setting up and understanding what's the right fit for you if you're setting up a business. And I hope it was useful. So next week we'll be talking about most probably intellectual property, because I think that's also an important aspect that we need to understand. In the meantime, if there are any questions or anything at all, please feel free to reach out to Edulink and they will definitely connect me with you all. So thank you so much for participating and I will see you all next week.